Welcome you all to Lipscomb University and to the Metro 50 event sponsored by the Andrews Institute for Civic Leadership. The Andrews Institute for Civic Leadership was founded in the memory of and to extend the legacy of legendary civic leader Nelson Andrews. And we're so happy today to have Sue and Carter Andrews with us to enjoy the Neighborhood Association meeting and to help us with the latest initiative of the Institute. Thank you so much. Before I introduce only our moderator, don't worry, I'm not going to introduce all the people at the table tonight. I want to acknowledge a couple of people here at Lipscomb who helped make all this possible. First, our provost, Craig Bledsoe. Where are you, Craig? Thank you for your support. And our Senior Vice President for Strategic Initiatives, Nancy Magnuson-Durham. We know these things don't happen by accident, and so I have to acknowledge in absentia Lydia Lincoln, who is our executive in residence at the Andrews Institute, and who put this all together and promptly went to the West Coast to get married. So we are thinking about her, although I don't think she's thinking about us. And finally, Kathy Kate, our Director of Community Leadership Programs at the Andrews Institute, and also the new Executive Director of Leadership Tennessee, our latest initiative in leadership development here in the state. There are several reasons we wanted to do this. One is we do believe that Nashville is a model in civic leadership and in government. And what better way to acknowledge that than at the 50th anniversary of metropolitan government. The other reason we wanted to do it is that our mantra is that great communities are intentional, not accidental. And the people you're going to hear from tonight were very intentional in the development of their neighborhood associations. They include one of our students who graduated in the inaugural class of the Masters in Civic Leadership at Lipscomb and at the Andrews Institute, Colby Sledge, who is joined tonight in the audience by Stephanie McCullough, who's working with him on Nashville Next. Stephanie is also a graduate of the master's program and is responsible for bringing technology to engage more Nashvillians than ever in the 2040 planning process. So we thank you for being here. And finally, we thank the students of the existing class. Raise your hand if you are here. Good, great, okay. This is the second cohort of the Masters in Civic Leadership, and all of them are engaged in one way or the other in making our neighborhoods and our community better. And finally, I want to acknowledge George Cate. Where's Mr. Cate? Who, with Mr. Siegenthaler, is one of the chairs of the Metro 50 Commission, and also, I'm not sure that Senator Harper is here, but they co-chair with Senator Velma Harper the Commission on Metropolitan's 50th anniversary. And now it's my pleasure to introduce a man that I am so happy to call my friend, who's been a mentor for more years than either one of us will admit, because we started working together when USA Today was launched in 1982. You know him as the legendary editor and journalist, as the defender of the First Amendment, and I know him as my friend. It is with great pleasure that I introduce John Singh.
Thank you very much, Linda. You know, if you get old enough, and I'm 85, and you have the right person introducing you, you get applause before you even open your mouth. So it's great to be here. Sue, Carter, how wonderful it is to have you here. I know that the spirit of Nelson Andrews is all over this meeting today, and having you here makes that spirit more vital than you can imagine. You know, Metropolitan Nashville 50 years ago came after a very tough political struggle. It had been on the ballot in 1958. City of Nashville had supported it, voted for it. The county outside the city had voted against it, and it was dead. But 1962 rolled around, there was a great deal of discontent in that county, that county area that had voted against. Much of that area had been annexed, and those people who had voted to stay outside now found themselves inside, and they found themselves paying a little more taxes, and so it came up again. And in 1962, another tough campaign, much tougher campaign. In that first campaign, the Nashville Tennessean and the Nashville Banner were on the same side. And everybody thought, what in the world is going on here? Both newspapers are for something for a change. You know, we had been against everything. Each had been against everything the other stood for. Just one brief story to illustrate that. We had gone through a big fight in the legislature over daylight savings time, and we were for it, the Tennessee, and the Banner was against it. And Time magazine said, in Nashville, the Morning Tennessee and Afternoon Banner rarely agree on anything but the time of day. And last week they couldn't agree on that. And, you know, we were both for it. Many people said, you know, must be something wrong with it if both of them are for it. At any rate, in 1962 it passed. A big part of this city has always been neighborhoods, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Neighborhoods, a place where people have a stable relationship. Neighborhoods in our community, some are very stable. There are some neighborhoods that are unchanging, but there are many other neighborhoods where change really characterizes its evolution, their evolution over the last 50 years. So we're here today, and the first panel is going to focus on the history of neighborhood associations. These were the pioneers that made this community tick. Now, you see their names there, and I'm not going to read you long introductions about them, but I want you to know that you can read them for yourself right there. And in the interest of time, each of the panels, first the panel to my left, that has nothing to do with political ideology. They just happen to be there on my left. And Betty just said, nobody is to your left. But the names are there, and they're names that might be familiar to most of you. They are going to each take 5 minutes and sort of give you an individual perspective. At the end of that, we're going to move to the right and move to the present and the future. Now, my titles, the pioneers and the present and the future, has nothing to do with what they're going to say. They're going to say whatever they want to say. And, you know, as a First Amendment advocate, I support that. The important thing is that at the end of this panel's discussion, we'll hear from some of you, I hope. I know that each 5-minute presentation is going to be worth digesting. Some of you want to make middle notes. Some might want to take written notes. At any rate, we'll begin with Betty Nixon, whose public career has meant so much to Metropolitan Nashville and to civic leadership. Betty?
Is this on? Is it on? Can you? Is it on now?
It's on now.
Thank you. I wrote mine out because I only have 5 minutes and I really care about what I want to say. In the late 60s and the early 70s, neighborhood groups were springing up across America. In part, they were a response to top-down governmental decision-making, and prime example of which was urban renewal. Nashville's first neighborhood organizations were formed in the early to mid-70s, and among them were Edgefield in East Nashville, Belmont Hillsborough, and Hillsborough West End. The goal of the neighborhood movement was to give greater voice to the grassroots in the public policy decision-making, and that really is the important point. It was not just to organize neighborhoods, it was to give greater voice to the grassroots. In Nashville, urban renewal did several things that created a reaction. Among them, it granted Vanderbilt University, a private entity, the power to condemn private homes and businesses in order to expand the campus. It built physical barriers around the black community through the interstate in North Nashville, cutting it off from the rest of the city. And it concentrated some, quote, unwanted uses in the urban areas. Those included public housing, rehabilitation facilities, and prison halfway houses. In the beginning, the neighborhood movement was decidedly urban. Its primary goals were first to strengthen the independent voices in the governance process, and secondly, to preserve the older communities bordering the central city. This vision was at odds with Nashville's way, and it was at odds with the new zoning ordinance. To quickly explain that, Comso said you would have a central city in which no residences were allowed, surrounded by apartments and office buildings, so surrounded by ring roads, surrounded by shopping centers, surrounded by suburbs, and then rimmed by rural communities. But by the nature of our goals in the neighborhood movement, we were at odds with the status quo, and the movement and its advocates were seen as radical. Urban neighborhoods said no a lot. They said no to tearing down homes that were built from 1850 to 1940 to be replaced by cheap multifamily and office structures. We said no to rezoning residential communities for commercial use. We said no to the illegal uses that had been allowed to permeate our urban neighborhoods. Community is a key word in the movement. The neighborhood movement was not just about buildings. It was about building communities that provided a vital urban life. We downzoned, we created historic zoning, we communicated, we monitored the work of the mayor, the planning commission, the Board of Zoning Appeals, the Traffic and Parking Commission, the Metro Council. We spoke up, we lobbied for sidewalks for our kids to walk to school, for increased water sewer capacity. We volunteered in the schools. We looked after our older neighbors. We had work days to clean up our neighborhoods. We worked together to improve public parks and open spaces, and we staged events to celebrate our progress. As the number of these groups grew and expanded into the suburban areas, we met each other at council meetings and other public events. And then we joined together to support our shared principles, to exchange ideas, and to lobby our common issues, and we did that in something called the Neighborhood Alliance. Let me end by saying I think Nashville owes a real debt to these pioneers, and they were many. Neighborhood organizations and their members created the vision and the reality of a vibrant urban life for Nashville. And they also made real, more open government, which I think serves us well as we respond creatively to change and to challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, May. Reverend Bill Barnes, the floor is yours.
Thank you, John. To give a Methodist preacher 5 minutes is pretty gutsy, John. There's a timekeeper here somewhere that I want to avoid.
He's looking at you, I'll tell you.
Okay, won't look at you. In 1966, I became the founding pastor of a congregation in the Edge Hill community. It was the first significantly integrated congregation in the city. We went not only with the idea of starting a congregation, but with carrying on a love affair with the community. We're on the threshold of a pretty massive urban renewal program, Betty. 2,100 families were to be dislocated in that neighborhood. Some of you know that those were replaced by things like the Beeman lot, and Rochelle Center expanded, and United Methodist Communications got a piece of that, and so forth. It was a massive undertaking. And the thing is that as soon as the community found out that the congregation cared about it, we started getting knocks on the front door. An 80-year-old retired railroader who had a letter in his hand saying either 60 or 90 days, you got to be out of your house. I wish there was time to really go into this, but let me just say that the replacement system at that time for the displacement that was going on, the replacement system was public housing. Already in Edge Hill, it was Edge Hill Homes and Gernert Homes. Edge Hill Homes was expanded. There was a whole new development up Hillside Avenue, Hardaway units, 300 units of, if anybody here knows Rick Bernhard would know, 235s, 221D3 with rent supplement. There was a whole additional 380 family units planned for north of Rose Park School. And we were managed to get Avon Williams to lodge a federal court suit, which finally was won, to replace that 380 public housing with Turnkey 3, Rick, Turnkey 3 units that provided for the same income levels, individual homes. Today, every one of those 100-plus homes is under purchase. So there was a definite long-term effort by the congregation and others to do something about concentrated poverty, which we're still dealing with and will be dealing with for quite some time. The only other thing I've got time to mention is seen in the living room at Edge Hill Church one day, the folks from Gernert Homes were meeting with the two managers of the Piggly Wiggly. And as we were leaving, I said, why don't you guys start a scholarship fund? 21 years later, over $500,000, and this is a function of the neighborhood association. 21 years later, over $500,000 have been put into scholarships for kids in Edge Hill who are going on to college, as well as having a monitor, an adult counselor with them through the process of their education. Neighborhood associations have a definite place to play, and I conclude with a coveted statement by Reinhold Niebuhr, who said that the human capacity for good makes democracy possible, and the human tendency to evil makes democracy necessary. Neighborhood associations are necessary to the democratic process in Metro. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Bill. You know, I would say, thinking back over all these 50 years, how lucky we've been to have great leadership. Next speaker, when he was a candidate, was the candidate of the neighborhoods. And when he was a mayor, he was the mayor of the neighborhoods, Bill Purcell.
Well, let me say what a privilege it is to be here at Lipscomb and in such extraordinary company, not just here on this platform, but frankly in this room, because from one side of this room to the other are the people who have lived the experiences we're about to talk through together and in many ways will decide the future of all of this. And then for me to follow Betty Nixon and Bill Barnes is extraordinary. When you follow Bill Barnes, really you just want to go straight to the collection and the benediction, and you're pretty much done. And that's what I'm tempted to do right now. And Betty Nixon and he are truly the pioneers in this city, in this movement, in this effort, of which we're all beneficiaries, and no one more than me. In 30 years ago, I guess exactly this year, my wife Debbie and I went to East Nashville to look, actually it was on a house tour, to look at houses there, and we fell in love with East Nashville. We fell in love with the built environment of the place. We felt attracted to the people who were there, those who were newly there, and frankly, those who had been there generation after generation. The fact that we sensed it as a welcoming and accepting place of great diversity, much greater than most neighborhoods that we'd ever lived in here or anywhere else. We fell in love with the fact that we could afford East Nashville, which was not true of a lot of other neighborhoods for a young public defender and a young state employee. So we bought a house in East Nashville. I remember going to the first neighborhood meeting. It was a meeting of the Lockland Springs Neighborhood Association. The neighbors had come and said it's time to experience what we have together as a neighborhood. And at that very first meeting, I witnessed the first secession movement I'd ever seen. The East End was seceding from Lockland Springs. It was too large. It didn't actually represent the people in that area where Vice Mayor George Cate had grown up. And so we became our own neighborhood. But from that experience, I came to know not only my neighbors, but a lot about what had brought them together. And to be honest with you, it was not a particular tragedy. It was not a particular assault, as Betty Nixon experienced in the eminent domain cases. It was rather a shared conviction that what was there was good, but it could be better, that what was present was critically important to quality of life, but that what had been lost, quite frankly, in education, in public safety, and our chief, Steve Anderson, is here, and the police officers who he's been there throughout this period, know, I think, as the neighborhood did, that this was not the safe neighborhood connected by families, multi-generational, living together, watching out for each other. And in the process, we were not safe. We were not being educated as we once were. We didn't have those things that neighborhood knew were possible, and people came together around that thought. We were absolutely attentive to what was going on over in Betty Nixon's neighborhood. For me, in 1986, the neighbors came and said, we'd like you to run for the legislature. And I said, I've never been to the Capitol. And they said, you're perfect, we'll send you. And having never been to the Capitol, I just went off to run and campaign with neighborhoods, some organized, some not organized, and got to the Capitol at a time when, frankly, much of the political power and political authority that we had looked to Washington for had now come back to the states. President Reagan had made it clear that that kind of central interest in Washington was not going to descend to neighborhoods like ours, and so we began to focus as a state on things like education and things like safety, and we lengthened prison sentences, and we built more prison beds, and we focused on education reform. But what also became apparent to me, as it was to Jan Bushing, for example, who had been elected out of the neighborhood movement in Betty Nixon's area at that time, was the reality that in the end you could pass all the laws that you wanted, but if there wasn't an implementation at the local level, if there wasn't interest at the local level, if there wasn't oversight at the local level, it wouldn't matter all that much. And that was true in all of these areas that quality of life were so involved with. And having realized that, I ran for mayor. Running for mayor through the neighborhoods of Nashville made very clear to me that where neighborhoods were organized, people had not just a shared vision about what was important, but what could be done. In those places where neighborhoods had not organized, had not come together, there was no less need, there was no less hope or vision, but there was no ability in the end to bring those things together. And so when the people of Nashville were kind enough to allow me to be the mayor in 1999, the very first thing we did on that first day was, by executive order, create an Office of Neighborhoods. And it was my great blessing and great honor to select the first person to lead the Office of Neighborhoods in the first Office of Neighborhoods in Nashville. And thank God I did. It was Brenda Wynn.
Thank you.
You know, that's terrific, Bill. You know, you'd much rather be introduced by the mayor than you would me, Brenda, so have at it.
You know, I thought about this. I thought, what was I thinking to agree to follow the likes of Betty Nixon, Bill Barnes, and Bill Purcell? Well, let me just tell you, I wasn't thinking at all. So, you know, my role tonight is to talk to you about what we did in that first Office of Neighborhoods. And as I sought to prepare my comments tonight, I pulled out an old file. I found that executive order that Bill Purcell used to create the Office of Neighborhoods. But I also found a presentation that I'd done to the Stanford Estates Neighborhood Association in 2000. in 2000, just a few months after we had taken office and created this Office of Neighborhoods and figured out what we were going to do. So I want to share with you really quickly what I told that group at that meeting. In an effort to improve the quality of life for all Nashvillians, and based on the vision of Mayor Bill Purcell, based on the vision Mayor Bill Purcell had for our city when he took office, Nashville is taking a neighborhood-based approach to addressing challenges and opportunities in our city. Our efforts are driven by the belief that collaboration among government and others outside government is vital to improving neighborhoods. As part of that vision, Mayor Bill Purcell created the Mayor's Office of Neighborhoods on September 22nd, 1999. It was one of his first official acts as mayor. Mayor Purcell's vision for the Office of Neighborhoods just after the election was an organization with three primary responsibilities. First, to be sure that the mayor and city government was receiving regular and accurate concerns of the neighborhoods that make up our city. Second, he wanted to ensure regular and constant communications with existing neighborhood associations. And finally, and though some folks in this room didn't agree with me, this mayor thought that his new office needed to be in the business of assisting in the development of neighborhood associations in areas where they didn't exist. To help shape our vision, we came up with a vision statement and a mission statement. The vision statement was to create an environment where neighborhoods are empowered to solve problems and participate with city government in addressing issues of mutual concern. Our mission statement was to improve the quality of life in Nashville's neighborhoods through more active and involved citizens and enhanced governmental response to community needs. Now, I told those folks that night, I said, today, the Mayor's Office of Neighborhoods handles constituent services, but we wanted to be more than constituent services. That was our goal. We had to be more than constituent services. We also coordinated Mayor's Night Out and Mayor's Night In meetings. And as some of you in the room came to those meetings. Some of you came to Mayor's Night Out meetings, and you came down to the courthouse where the mayor brought together his staff, Metro department heads, and you sat down and you talked to folks who could solve your problems. We got to hear firsthand what it was that you needed us to do. Our office also published at that time a quarterly newsletter. And we served as a convener of what we call the Neighborhood Response Team. That team was a coordinated system of service provision, neighborhood planning, and outreach processes that honored the value of citizens' time and participation, and it minimized the duplication of our efforts across the city. We brought together Metro departments with neighborhood representatives to respond to and identify or solve problems. The team was made up of the Codes Department, the Health Department, the Fire Department, Public Works, Nashville Electric Service, Beautification, the Planning Department, the Legal Department, and the Sheriff's Office. In addition to reaching out to neighborhood groups and associations, the Neighborhood Response Team also ensures regular and continuing dialogue among Metro departments. I wrapped up by saying, Arthur Bloom says that neighborhood revitalization is dependent on resident revitalization too. One cannot build the physical infrastructure of a neighborhood without also building the social infrastructure. This Arthur Bloom quote established for us the basis upon which we hope to build the capacity within neighborhoods to bring about true neighborhood change. And so I was able to report that night that because of this mayor and the Metropolitan Council's approval, we were going to provide funding in the budget that year to implement a neighborhood training component that was to build the capacity of people in the community to change their neighborhoods. A lot of you came to some of our neighborhood training sessions. We did Codes and Zoning 101. We did grant writing for neighborhood groups. We did becoming a 501c3 organization. We did all of those things in order to try to build your capacity to bring about change in your community. But the other thing we did, this mayor did, was to invest in neighborhoods. We also reported that night that we were going to have a neighborhoods conference, the first ever neighborhoods conference where we recognized neighborhood heroes, and we were going to physically invest in neighborhoods. We had $100,000. We got $100,000 from this mayor to make small-scale improvements in neighborhoods. Neighborhood groups oversaw the implementation of the grants that they wrote and got funding. And so it was again my great pleasure to serve as a mayor, as a first director of the Mayor's Office of Neighborhoods, and to see neighborhoods in Nashville grow from the about 300 that we saw when we came in to somewhere in the neighborhood or in excess of about 600 now. So thanks so much.
Well, you know, we've really sort of been through a chronological evolution here, beginning with Betty, and now Billy Fields has tracked those neighborhood associations for a long time now. The floor is yours, Billy.
Well, the first thing I thought I was going to have to do tonight was talk about when Robertson actually came across the river and met John Donaldson and I to welcome us to Nashville, but y'all have covered that. But what I would say is in 1986, my wife and I moved back to Nashville. I'd grown up in Goodlettsville, and she wanted to buy a house, and I had very much the same kind of experience that Mayor Purcell had. But I grew up in Goodlettsville, so I knew what East Nashville was like. And she took me through the East Nashville, said, we're going to live in East Nashville. I said, oh, no, we're not. And it's dangerous in East Nashville. And she says, it's not, and we'll make it better. So my wife brought me to the neighborhoods in East Nashville. About the second year I was there, she took me to a neighborhood meeting, and the third meeting I went to, or fourth meeting I went to, I was blessed to be elected the president of Laughlin Springs. So for 3 years I was president of Laughlin Springs, and I realized that I did not know the president of East End, nor did I know the president of Edgefield. Now, those were the three neighborhoods that were closest to me, and I didn't know them, so I called them, and we started talking, and they said, well, have you ever been to the National Neighborhood Alliance? And I said, no. And said, well, you need to find this guy named John Stern. And I said, who is John Stern? And they said, just go meet John Stern. So I found my friend John Stern, and he introduced me to other people like Patricia Toddy and Herschel Warren and Bob Cooper and Gene DeSella, and I can go on and on and on, and I'll leave somebody out, Chester Hughes and Tom Epperson and all the others that have really gone in and made a difference in the lives of the neighborhoods. You know, the police we've always had a great police department, but along this time period, they decided they were going to be community police officers. Some of those community sergeants are in the room tonight. Chief Anderson continues to go to neighborhood meetings. He goes to more neighborhood meetings than the mayor's neighborhood staff goes to, I think, because if there's a neighborhood meeting, he's there. And because it's now important, there's a role for neighborhoods within this community. The government depends on the neighborhoods to help us make decisions. You know, from my perspective, I can't think of anything that I've had more fun doing is watching the neighborhoods evolve, because I've been blessed. I think I was the 4th director of neighborhoods, and I think I was the 6th director of neighborhoods. They move me around a lot. I don't know. I can't keep a job. But the reality is, through those opportunities that mayors have given me, I've gotten to see this community in such a wonderful way, to work and see neighbors get excited about we can do this together. Many of you are out there tonight. You've made it happen. The neighborhoods, from the time that Miss Nixon and Reverend Barnes and John Summers and some of the Jan Bushing and some of those other others that were here, they made it easy for me to be able to come in and be a neighbor. They started paving the way in, and by the time when Mayor Purcell came into office, he said, this is important. Mayor Dean says, this is important. I don't know who the next mayor is going to be, but I surely hope and pray that they say it's important. The neighborhoods in Nashville that have organized, that have worked together, you can tell the difference when you drive through them, when you visit them. Those neighborhoods prosper. Those neighborhoods are excited. They are changing. Our goal and our role is to continue to support those other neighborhoods through the Neighborhood Alliance, through the Neighborhoods Resource Center that you're going to hear about. There was another little dream that was born on a napkin in a restaurant. Nashville's a special place. Nashville is different than other cities. Nashville is a great place to be. We're on the top of everybody's list because we deserve it. You have earned it. As a community, we have arrived. We are the it city, not because the New York Times says we are, but because y'all have made us the it city. And I'm not going to talk anymore.
You know, the story of 50 years of Metro, particularly when you think about the neighborhoods, is a success story, a great success story. And when you read about Nashville, wherever you are in this country, almost wherever you are in the world, you know what a great city it is. And its neighborhoods have made Metro work, and Metro has given us a national reputation. But you know, every moment of our history has not been all that perfect, all that lovely. And I mentioned just one moment that was ugly to lead in to Sharon's presentation. There came a time in this city when traffic became a serious problem, and there was a decision made to take the Interstate 40 through North Nashville, and there were two routes. And those of us who lived through it look back on it and realize that the route we took destroyed many businesses in what was then a viable Jefferson Street community. Which brings me to Sharon Hunt, who's going to talk to you about JUMP. And that's Jefferson Street United Partners?
Merchants Partnership.
Merchants Partnership. It's yours.
Thank you very much. It is true. The interstate came in and knocked us down, but it did not knock us out. We are on our way back. It says what's happening now, we are doing it right now. I want you to know that it took all of the things that Betty, Reverend Barnes, Mayor Purcell, Brenda Wynn, and Billy Fields talked about. That interstate, talking about collaboration, talking about making things happen, talking about making a place safe. That's what the people said that they wanted. They wanted a community that was safe and aesthetically pleasing. And we have put together such a plan from a collaboration with MDHA. Cammie Woodle said that it could be done, and I believed her, and I got busy. I opened my mouth and begged. You know, I grew up in the 60s, and the Temptations said, ain't too proud to beg, so I begged for everything that I need in order to make something happen. And it works. It works. The collaboration, we have a Gateway to Heritage project, and that project is a landscaping beautification project on Jefferson Street. But not only is it a beautification project, it is a museum almost of history, a preservation of history in that community that went away when the interstate came in. We had relationships with Public Works, MDHA, Tennessee State University, all of these people coming together to make this a beautiful place. And when the people said in that Sub-Area 8 meeting, Rick Bernhardt, because he had those meetings and said, we want to hear from the people. And they had all these wonderful greenways and all of these plans for these parks, community centers, but the people said we want to feel safe in our community. And that's what we're doing. And it was because of Mayor Purcell that we got some sidewalks over there, that people were able to walk up and down. They didn't need the greenways. We'll walk up and down the sideways, get us some lights so we can feel safe. And those kinds of things are happening. They also were talking about connecting Jefferson Street with other parts of town. We have a 28 connector now that is connecting us. Now we need some development on Jefferson Street between that Gateway to Heritage and the 28 connector for people to come and visit, because I just don't want cars passing us by. I want people to come to Jefferson Street and stop and shop. So we need some new development. Development is critically important in the revitalization of a community. But what comes first is the residents. Retail follows residents. And if you don't believe it, just think back on Fountain Square. A lot of people don't know that Fountain Square had a residential plan right along with the business plan of what was there. Residential plan did not get implemented. Therefore, Fountain Square was not successful. All of that is critical. You got to have the public, the private, the community, and everybody working together. I'm not sure how much time I have left yet, but I can tell you that what I'd like to see in a plan is that collaboration. Let me just say this real quick. We have a neighborhood stabilization program where organizations in the North Nashville community came together, and we received $3 million to build and to acquire and rehab homes in that community. And we have about 36 homes that have been built, and it's like brand new homes. And I'm so happy and pleased for people in that community to live. A plan is one that I'd love to see that's all inclusive, intentional, and deliberately intentional, where all people, black and white, Jews and Gentiles, short and tall, fat and skinny, gay and straight, can work together, and together we can transform a community. We can transform this city a community at a time.
Ah, very good. Ben Freeland, I know you're involved in Crossings Nashville. Many of you might not know about Crossings Nashville, but you're about to find out. Ben?
All right, let's see if this is this on?
Yes, it is.
Okay, good. 'Cause I'm not quite as articulate and of a speaker, and I'm really honored to be here today as a newcomer to Nashville, and really to see the vision and the. Okay, is that it? But really honored to be up here with this panel. I mean, I'm a newcomer to Nashville, and to see the vision and the commitment that was made long ago, and you really see it today coming forward, and to be active in it, and it really sucks you in as a newcomer. And if you don't think this city is different, you really need to go live in other cities. You know, if you've grown up here, it's hard to appreciate it. But I can tell you, coming from Florida and different cities, this is a great place. It's had great vision, great leadership, and I think the neighborhoods are where it started. And, you know, I'm a business person. I got involved on the business side, but the neighborhood and the people are what really brings it home for you and what really brings it together. The Crossings Nashville Action Partnership, which was formerly the Hickory Hollow Action Partnership, was focused and organized to redevelop the business district there with the failing mall and really trying to find a direction for that business district. But it's grown into a lot more than just focused on the business side of the equation. And it was really brought together for business, government, and for residents to work together to really have a common goal. And that's really taken root and gone in many different directions I don't think any of us expected. You know, we've got different committees from beautification that have cleanup days and help codes to really enforce the rules that are out there. We have a business development committee that works to bring new businesses to our area and really make it more attractive and promote the benefits of the community. We have community events to create spirit, from night out against crime to garage sales to concerts and festivals, and those things really put some fabric into the community. And we have a crime committee, works close with Metro Nashville. We talked about the police department and their community-based efforts. It's unbelievable. Crime rates fallen dramatically there, and that's because of the relationship. When something does happen, people take notice, make adjustments, and we really get control of it early. And the brand, there's a whole committee just on the brand of the Crossings now, to how to redevelop that and how to make that a positive environment. How do you move forward and get people to want to stop and shop and live and move to a community? So you start getting that much activity. You get over 400 members. You know, I got kind of coaxed into it as well. I went to a meeting one day and they said, "Oh, we need to start this new group up to bring all the associations together." And guess what? You get to be the guy. And next, you know, somebody said, "What's my role here?" I'm really the mouthpiece of a lot of people that have been working hard and long for a long time out there, and it's really a lot of fun. But we organized in 2010. You know, now I'm pretty much do more director type things in that association. There are leaders that have been active a long time that have really taken on and taken active roles again throughout that whole organization. You know, when we work really hard to develop relationships with the mayor's office, with the Chamber of Commerce, with different groups and organizations that really, I think, have really helped that community move forward. And so there is a common voice. When there's something that goes on out there, there is a common voice and a purpose, and I think it's getting responded to well. And what I think that's brought to the area, we currently have Nashville State Community College opened a campus up last fall. Enrollment doubled this spring. They've already approved the next expansion. MTSU has moved in to offer additional classes. Talking to the administration there, they're now expecting up to 7,000 students in that campus. Metro has committed to put a regional library, rec center, park. HCA has invested $220 million into a data center. Meharry Medical's just announced we're putting a 6,600 square foot primary care imaging center in. The Global Mall, the mall is sold, and we have a new owner of the mall, and we're excited to hear what is going to happen there. It's called the Global Mall. So that's what's happening. It's the fastest growing zip code in Metro. It's going to be the fastest growing zip code moving forward. Very diverse, dynamic population. And I think that's what neighborhood associations bring. So we've kind of brought it together with Crossings Nashville, and the fun part is now every neighborhood's creating their own associations, becoming more vibrant, and when things need to come together for a common voice, they're kind of using CNAP for that tool. So I think, it's kind of strange how the power comes together and then it really spreads out, needs to get back into every neighborhood and on its own. So anyway, that's my story, and I'm happy to be involved.
Fabian Bedney represents the 31st District. I mentioned that some neighborhoods are stable from the past, others are in transition, revitalizing themselves. My guess is, Fabian, that in your district there is some of both.
Yeah, that's correct. Well, first of all, thank you all for being here tonight. I'm honored to be speaking next to these people and in front of you. I appreciate you taking the time to come here. And I was asked to speak for 5 minutes about something that will probably take 2 hours, and is to explain the nature of Latino integration into the American way and how they become organized in neighborhoods and how they become a better part of the community. And I just can't do that, so I'm going to try to do my best. So I'll tell you a little story. My degree is in architecture. I'm from Buenos Aires, Argentina, and my partner, Maria Jose, told me one year, I'm going to go to New York City to work for Vignoli, a very famous architect from Argentina. I was building this multi-million-dollar project on the Hudson. And so she went to New York, and when she came back like 4 months later, she started telling me a story that Vignoli had, this huge project, but he had to go to a neighborhood meeting to get the project approved. And for me, that was just amazing. What do you mean that he has to go to the community to get it approved? And well, yeah, that's the way they do things in the U.S. And so for me, it was a really amazing stuff, because in Argentina and in Latin America, there is no trust of government. Government is not there to really respond to you. It's just to rule you. It's very cumbersome. It's many times it's corrupt and inefficient. So there is a cultural issue, I think, a big difference between the culture in Latin America and the culture in the U.S. So when we're trying to figure out how does somebody that has a baggage from Latin America come to the U.S. and become part of the community, you have to understand the difference, the cultural difference between the two groups. Now, because the government is so alien from the community becomes very social. You have this solidarity sense, this sense of community there is really the only people that you can rely on are your neighbors and your friends. So Latinos, we tend to be very engaged with our friends and communities. So now people are in the U.S. and they are separated from their families and friends. When I came here, I was by myself in Columbus, Ohio. I didn't know anybody. So then there is all this process of trying to find a new identity, find a new way to belong and to be part of the community. And that takes a while. So what ends up happening is that you find these non-geographic, non-traditional ways of finding your new neighborhood, your new community. And what ends up happening is people may find that community in their church, or at a neighborhood store, or at a restaurant, or at a soccer team. We have one of the biggest soccer leagues in Nashville are Latino. Just, for example, there is this club called Ibiza. And if you go to Ibiza on a night, you'll find hundreds of people there just engaging in salsa dancing. And I don't think it's so much about the salsa, but it's about really finding people that they can connect with in doing something that reminds them of home, something that makes them feel safe and a part of something that they understand. So I think it's a non-geographic thing. It's more like a virtual thing. Other ways that the Latino community has to work together is through civic institutions. And we have something called the Plaza Comunitaria or Casa Azafran. These are community organizations that create an environment, a space that kind of recreates a typical thing that comes from the times of the colony, which is called the Plaza Mayor. If you understand the typology of how the Spaniards went through the world, settling new cities, they will create a Plaza Mayor, a main plaza, and the church will be next to it, the Cabildo, the government building will be next to it. Everything that was important to the community will be there. So the social life, the pulse of the community will be around this plaza. And so that's kind of what is missing in Nashville. I mean, when Latinos are trying to find that place where they can go and engage with their neighbors, that space is not there. So they go to other places. Like, for example, we have El Protector, which is a great program from the police department that creates this neighborhood, these community events that end up being extremely popular. I mean, you'll have like 3,000, 5,000 people that will attend this meeting. They go there because they want to be connected. They want to be part of something that they are excited about, and they're extremely popular, you know. And it's great that the El Protector, that the Nashville Police Department realized, excuse me, that was a good way to engage with the community, because the community was a little bit afraid of the police, coming from Latin America, where you should, and it would be a safe thing to be afraid of the police in reality. So, but in here it's not the case. So to have an El Protector was a good way to start relearning your relationship with government. The other thing that happens is, many of my friends, people that I know, there is an upward mobility thing in the Latino community, and so people may settle when they just move into a city, in a part of the city, you know, like Antioch or Madison or whatever. But once they are doing better, they'll just buy a nice house in the suburb and they'll move next to you. I mean, I'm sure many of you have immigrant neighbors that made it in America. You know, they had a successful life project, and now they just live, you know, in the middle of all of us. So they became like Americans, you know, truly successful, prototypical people. So I don't know that we'll end up seeing a Latino neighborhood like you can see a Chinese neighborhood or a Chinatown in New York City or in San Francisco. I mean, I don't think that we'll end up seeing necessarily a place that is predominantly Latino. That will be interesting. Now, the one thing that we have that is going for us that is great is Mr. Freeland, for example. He's realized that diversity is what is important about the area of Antioch, and he has created some environments that kind of look like, for me, like that Plaza Mayor, that main plaza, an environment where people can go and engage. And I'm sorry, I'm putting words on you, but it's. I mean, if you didn't plan on doing that, I mean, it was great, because I think that's going to be a very successful model to bring people together and to engage the community, because people are starving for an environment where they can come together and be successful. And I think we need to create, as a city, we have an opportunity to create those environments where people can come forward and connect and be part of the community. And that's kind of the way I wanted to close. I mean, I don't think it's going to happen necessarily just from the immigrant community or from the Latino community. I think it's going to require that we as a city also engage and create those spaces so people can also be part of the community. So, thank you.
Fine, thank you. Dan Heller, talk to us about being a neighborhood entrepreneur.
Okay. That phrase, I wouldn't call myself that. Somewhere along the way, I got labeled an entrepreneur.
Somebody whispered in my ear. I'm sorry.
No. No, it's written here, and you're not the only one, certainly.
I'm slow on reading. I whispered in my ear.
You know, seeing opportunities, taking risks, maybe in that sense. I do have a business. I'm a developer in East Nashville. And first, let me just say, I can't believe I am on this panel. It is really an honor. 10 years ago, I never would have expected to be on this panel with all of these guests. But I think about Billy Fields, who I met 10 years ago. We worked on some community projects together. To Sharon and Fabian, just didn't expect to be here. So I'm really, really grateful and feeling very lucky, not just to be here, but to live in Nashville at this point in time. We are ascendant. We are burgeoning. We've all read the national press, but it's a really exciting, very dynamic time to live in our city. And I feel really grateful to focus very myopically on one tiny slice of East Nashville. And what I've learned over the years in various businesses and from my dad, very lucky to grow up in a culture that valued certain things. One was to help make the world a better place, deeply ingrained in our family culture. And for those of you who aren't familiar with some of the projects that I've done, if you've been to Mitchell Deli in Inglewood, that's the area that I focused on and probably the main reason I'm here. It was a very rough neighborhood, very scary in a lot of ways. And I think some of the policemen can attest to the fact it was a hub for lots of drugs, lots of violence. Why I moved into a house right across the street is still beyond me, but I would hear gunfire. I did not know how bad it was. I had the opportunity to acquire some of the commercial buildings across the street, and there was a point at which I had to send a signal to the community that there had to be some changes there. And there were bars on the windows. Early one Sunday morning, I got down on a knee and I got my electric drill. And just as I was about to take the first security bolt off, there was a loud bang, bang, bang. And I thought, really, I've made a terrible mistake. I will get shot. I will go bankrupt. It was a very risky proposition, but I had faith, and I found a lot of inspiration in the relationships that I had developed while being there, a lot of faith in the established community associations. And living in that neighborhood, I think, is unique. I don't know of a lot of developers that wasn't a developer at the time, but somehow the culture of the neighborhood, the people, the relationships brought out in me a kind of focus that I hadn't known before. And as a result, long story short, simple things make a big difference. Took off the security windows, cleaned up the trash, painted, put in security lights. Over a relatively short period of time, it unleashed this wave of community support, invested in a courtyard that fulfilled the function of some of the things that Sharon and Fabian and Billy have talked about, which is to create a safe place where people can come and gather, to stop and shop. And it signaled that there was a new attitude about what that commercial corner could be at Riverside and McGavick. And within a short period of time, it started to snowball, and it attracted different kinds of businesses. As a developer or property owner, we have choices to rent to the status quo. We can rent to a title loan company or maybe a discount tobacco mart. Thank God Mitchell Deli came along. Great sandwiches. I feel very lucky. That is a big stroke of luck that he happened to come along when he did, and a little coffee shop. So in a way, people have said, you know, the role that I've played on that tiny little corner is something of a curator, because we really, and it wasn't me, but I listened very carefully to what the neighborhood was asking for. And as a result, we were able to create this really nice collection of businesses that fulfilled, I think, more of what the potential of the neighborhood could be. And, you know, I'm a little bit odd in some ways. I mean, I approach things in different ways, and I see opportunities maybe where other people won't. But what drives this is something I learned from my dad, who's managed a variety of people over the years. And he said one key to management is to create the conditions that allow people's natural genius to shine. And I took that attitude, something I grew up with, it was a philosophy, and I kind of brought that into my neighborhood. I thought, what conditions will allow the natural genius of the neighborhood to shine? And it really has had a very positive effect on my life. It's created opportunities that I wouldn't have otherwise had. I'm very, very grateful to all the relationships, the people that I've met and known just in the short time that I've been in East Nashville. And it allowed a foundation to create another project called Urban Green Lab. And if you go to urbangreenlab.org, you'll learn a little bit more about this very unique community center, which is adapting and evolving to some of the changing conditions of the neighborhood itself. But it's a place people will be able to go to learn about urban agriculture and solar energy and weatherizing your home. It'll be a place to bridge that gap between thinking and doing when it comes to living healthier, living more sustainably, saving money. And it's something that's quite unique, not just in Nashville, but as we understand, there are very few places like this in the country. And I'm really thrilled to have a team that is coalesced, a community team, all volunteers, that is coalesced around this idea. So it takes this idea of transformation and it brings it to what I think most people are seeing as a higher level. We're leaning towards something that really is going to have an impact and set a model, not just for our city, but for perhaps other cities, for how communities can come together for a higher purpose. So I think that's all I have to say. I'm right at my time, but thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Yolanda, you had the Neighborhood Resource Center.
Yes.
Talk to us about how that center can help facilitate change, the sort of change that Fabienne Bednet and others on the panel have talked about.
Well, it's difficult to talk about the Neighborhoods Resource Center without recapping much of the history that you all have already shared. So I'll do my best to not reiterate the things that have been said, but the Neighborhoods Resource Center is designed to be just that, a resource to neighborhoods. And we define a neighborhood as a place where people live, play, work, worship, shop, or go to school. And regardless of whether a neighborhood association has been in existence for 10 years or 2 years or 6 months or just starting up, we recognize that all neighborhood associations, there's still room for improvement and need for help. And that's where we come in. At NRC, we work to enhance communications between residential neighborhood groups, faith-based communities, local businesses, and the city of Nashville. We provide a forum to share information, identify concerns, discuss issues, and resolve conflicts. In the early 1970s, there were only a few neighborhood organizations in Nashville. But by the early 1990s, there were dozens of new neighborhood associations being formed. And with over 250 groups being identified by 2002, but with all these new organizations came many questions. How do we get started? How do we deal with various problems that are occurring in our community? And the Neighborhoods Resource Center arose out of that direct need from the Nashville Neighborhood Alliance. So when new organizations were being formed, the primary source of resource and support was NNA. But it was an all-volunteer organization, and NNA found itself unable to provide the in-depth attention and specialized services that the neighborhood movement needed. NNA decided to form a sister organization to do just that, and out of that, the Neighborhoods Resource Center was born. And at that time, it was decided that they would focus on 3 major areas of neighborhood support, and those would be leadership training, community organizing, and information services. The services at the NRC have continued to evolve today to include a state-of-the-art geographic information system, capacity building workshops, job-based economic development, neighborhood technology training and deployment, as well as intentional, intensive neighborhood organizing efforts. We are built on the philosophy around using principles of asset-based community development. The Neighborhood Resource Center supports residents and other stakeholders as they build community upon the strengths of the neighborhood. Through training sessions, providing technical assistance, and individual coaching, we support neighborhood-based associations as they map their community assets and mobilize its capabilities. Through this work, community leaders are creating and strengthening institutions, relationships, and processes that support healthy, viable, and sustainable communities. This past year, the Neighborhood Resource Center assisted 23 neighborhood groups. We helped to create 85 new partnerships. We trained 214 neighborhood leaders, and we participated in 321 community improvements and were instrumental in assisting 349 citizens to assume leadership roles within the community. We define community building and organizing as continuous, self-renewing efforts that are led by community residents, focused on collective action, aimed at relationship building and problem solving, and build a stronger community. We also believe that data can provide a unique picture of local communities by providing information on indicators such as household income levels, age and education level of a population, and the Census Bureau data can tell us race and ethnic makeup of a community and how a population has changed over time. With this type of information in particular, we find it useful to help demonstrate the need for resources within a community. And so we teach others how to use Census Bureau data and other data tools effectively and efficiently to make decisions within their community. So how does all of that fit together? Well, when problems are overwhelming, people want to know, where do we begin? And so I'll give you an example of an initiative that we're working on now. 5 women were murdered in 2 years. They were found in vacant homes in the North Nashville area. The Neighborhoods Resource Center sponsored a meeting with residents and other stakeholders and created the North Nashville Leadership Council. The group met several times and identified several priorities and possible solutions. So where did they start? Well, they needed to know what was the cause of this. The vacant houses. They were a staging ground for crime and drug activity. We assisted in organizing a survey of one small neighborhood, and we found 63 vacant homes. The North Nashville Leadership Council then met with the Codes Department and began tracking the status of these abandoned properties. And since then, many of them have been demolished or repaired. However, crime continued to be a problem beyond the vacant houses. And since the neighborhood leaders had already built a relationship with the police, we facilitated a relationship between the police and the city, where that group also received funding to put security cameras throughout their neighborhood. Well, then that led to another conversation, is what would we do with those that were getting off the street? Well, that led to employment. That led to a discussion around job training and employment for those who wanted a fresh start. At that time, the North Nashville Leadership Council partnered with several job training agencies and agreed to make personal contact with people needing work, churches, and other neighborhood leaders. Over 175 people attended the job fair, talking to employers and training programs and learning about the expungement of criminal records. So then you say, what happens next? Well, then there's a role for elected officials in all of this, and how do they make a difference? In July of 2012, this same group decided to co-sponsor a political forum for residents to hear about candidates running for state legislature, school board, and other offices. Over 200 people attended this event, and more than any other forum we've held. Candidates responded to specific questions about problems in North Nashville, the future development needs, and much more. So where do you begin for neighborhoods? We suggest that all it takes is just that, starting with that first step. With that beginning, we've touched on crime, policing, housing, employment, and more. And as you can see, neighborhood associations are a valuable tool for helping to improve the lives of those in a given community. All a neighborhood group has to do is just to begin. And we believe that if we continue to work together, we will create a better community shaped by and shared by all, one neighborhood at a time.
Thank you, Yolanda. Kobe Sledge, you've been involved in Nashville Next. You've been involved with SNAP, the South Nashville Action People. You know, you listen to these panelists, and the neighborhoods sound so wonderful, and they are. But there also can be friction, and there also can be tension. It's not always negative. Talk about that.
Sure. I think every person up here, friction lives with them. Friction's the secret panelist here, I think, because The friction within a neighborhood association is what drives it. Friction is inefficiency. When we talk about friction, we talk about losing energy. We talk about creating things within it that aren't moving us toward that ultimate goal. But within those inefficiencies, I think within neighborhood associations is where we meet each other. Friction causes us to have to hear each other, to have to listen to each other. I became the co-chair of South Nashville Action People about 3 weeks before everything with the fairground started. And there was a lot of friction there. But in that friction is where I got to know a whole lot of people very quickly. When you're trudging in the snow the week between Christmas and New Year's, meeting people at their door in their pajamas, you get to know some people. And that friction is what taught me what it means to be part of a neighborhood. Not a neighborhood association, what it means to be part of a neighborhood. Friction, I think, refines what a community needs. It refines the desires of a community. When we go through friction as a neighborhood group and we're trying to determine what it is that our various constituencies are looking toward and are desiring between the person who's lived there 40 years and the person who's lived there 4 months, we clarify that picture. We find out what the identity of our neighborhoods are through that friction. And I think finally that even though friction takes away energy, and it costs a lot of energy to be an integral part of a neighborhood, it also creates energy. It creates a spark. It creates several sparks throughout our communities and throughout our neighborhoods. And from those sparks is where we're able to come up with the ideas that the leaders on these panels have come up with over the last 50 years. I think that when it comes to neighborhoods and when it comes to the future, and we talked about Nashville Next as we plan for the next 25 years, and we look back in this plan for over the last 50, Billy, everyone talked about essentially creating that group, creating that association, creating that office, and creating an environment where neighborhoods and metro government could work together. And it's worked. I mean, the evidence is here. We're all up here because it's worked. There has been efficiency. It took a lot of inefficiencies to get us there over the last 50 years, but we're here because city government and neighborhoods and businesses and nonprofits are working together, and they're going through all that friction together. And that's exactly what we're going to have to go through over the next 25 years and beyond. In closing, the mayors here, Mayor Purcell, Mayor Dean, you have been mayors of neighborhoods. And Billy mentions, that he hopes that the next mayor of Nashville will take that same emphasis, will put that same emphasis on neighborhoods. The next mayor of Nashville will have to put that same emphasis on neighborhoods. And it's because of all the people up here and all the people in the audience that they do. The success of Metro, the success of Nashville is built on the success of our neighborhoods.
Thank you very much. Well, it's time to go to you for questions or comments. And I want to begin by asking you to join me. I will tell you, when I sat down in front of this microphone, I had no hope, realizing there were 11 panelists here, that we would be through at the moment 15 minutes to the hour. And I've taken the last 45 seconds. It's now 14 minutes to the hour. And it's a great tribute, not just to Bill Barnes, who said to ask a preacher to give it in 5, but for all of them. And I just ask you to give this panel for thoughtful, meaningful commentary. And having said that, the danger now is that there is out there among you some long-winded people who are going to who are going to make a speech. And I'm going to ask you to keep it as condensed as you can. If you can put the question to an individual member, that's fine. If it's a general question, there may be more than one response, but they have proven they can be brief. The question is, can you? And now we're going to find out. Any question, any person. Now, you know, if you don't raise your hand, I can get out of here at 6:50. Yes. You want to come to the microphone, please, so everybody can hear you, and then others might be challenged to line up behind you. I hope.
All right. I think this is probably the best possible panel to ask this question, and it's a segue from...
Would you mind just stating your name?
Sure. My name is Freddie O'Connell. I think following on Colby's observation about friction, I think one of the most fascinating tensions is between organized neighborhood and kind of, again, to Councilman Bednay's point, the role of government in that. And I think there is obviously some friction there in terms of the support that a city and municipal government can provide to its neighborhoods, but then also the role in which neighborhoods sometimes become cast as antagonists. And I'd love to hear some observations from this panel and reflections on that from Nashville's 50 years.
Well, I think that's right on the money, because the truth of the matter is this is a government 50 years ago that was created out of friction that was intense, but in the end creative and positive. Who wants to respond to that?
Well, I can talk about the fact that the interstate was a very intense friction issue with the North Nashville community. The fight went as far as the Supreme Court, and we lost. As you know, the interstate is here, and it's just come to the Gateway to Heritage project. It's not necessarily restitution for what happened to that community, because there's much more that we need to have done in that community for us to say that we are satisfied with what's been done to recover us from that. But I do think, when it comes to me personally, it is what gives me the confidence to ask questions, to ask for things that I want, to move forward and say that, you know, we deserve better and we expect you to give it to us.
Bill Barnes.
Well, I'm glad, Freddie, for your question, because historically, zoning has been exclusionary. We zone certain neighborhoods sometimes to keep the folks out that we don't want in here. If you read the history of Detroit and Chicago, other cities, you find that the word NIMBY, not in my backyard. Now, are we overcoming that? Are we looking for a more diverse kind of population, which affects education? Diversity affects crime. It affects the quality of schools in neighborhoods. It affects employment records, etc. So that's to say, if you talk with the folks at Woodbine, even the folks at Habitat and so forth, you'll find that there have been difficulties in neighborhoods because we don't want certain folks there. Now, we're on the way, I hope, to overcoming that. There's got to be, Freddie, the willingness to see diversity in neighborhoods that we haven't always accepted.
All right, a question. I think
if I
my
could
guess
comment
is
real quick on that.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ben.
On that friction, I think the way that I've seen the associations and the different entities work through these issues is mutual respect. When you lose that, you lose your ability. If you think you're going to bulldoze through a situation one-sided, that's when it becomes impassable sometimes. And you just need to keep that mutual respect. And it's like any relationship, marriage, anything. At some point, you're not going to agree, but you got to respect the other person's point of view and keep moving. And I think that's kind of the secret ingredient to get through that.
Thank you. I think we're about to hear a question from a student. Am I right?
Yes.
So will you tell us who you are?
My name is Diamond Bass. I'm Courtney Hubbard.
Do you both have the same question, or are we going to have two?
Oh, it's the same question.
Okay.
My granddad, he was a part of, like, he used to come to all the associating, the neighborhood association meetings. And I was wondering if there is, like, a program for, like, teenagers to get involved with to help out.
Yeah, it's called your neighborhood association. Honestly, because in my neighborhood we have a very wide range of ages, and my board as of 2 years ago was a bunch of people who probably weren't even 10 years older than y'all sitting down and saying, okay, we're a neighborhood association now, what do we do? And from that we grew and we figured out and we met the people on this panel and the people in this audience, and we learned what it meant to be a part of a neighborhood and part of a neighborhood association. And there may be other outlets out there, but I would tell you, you find your neighborhood organization and you get involved, because that's the first step to knowing exactly what to do.
John.
Yes.
There's also, however, the mayor's youth council, and you have the mayor here who establishes a youth council by executive order, and then you have Tom Ward from Oasis Center over there who has the role of operating it. So before you leave, you have a chance actually to connect up in a very special and personal way with the people that can connect you directly to the government.
Thank you.
And I would just remind you, go ahead, Ben.
I'd say, and do what you're doing right now is show up and ask questions, and you'll find the path pretty quickly. And congratulations.
And I would just remind you that young people your age and just a little older changed the character and color, complexion of this city 50 years ago, and we're all indebted to them for that. Next question.
Thank you all for helping to make Nashville and the world a better place. I really appreciate this meeting. In an effort to improve civic leadership, given term limits on Metro Council, could this panel comment on citizen connections to city commissions, specifically your opinion on whether directors and chairs of Metro commissions should be elected by citizens instead of appointed? Thank you.
Fools rush in.
Oh, good, Betty.
Betty, you've just been elected by two bills to your left.
Well, the network of commissions and boards in the charter 50 years ago was an effort to bring other voices into the government, and it was a good thing. I think what some of us who kind of rebelled, as you could tell from my comments, was that we also needed outside voices that were not appointed by the mayor and approved by the council, who had a more independent approach to some of the things that were going on in the city. I personally think that'd be an awful lot of elections, and I think we're probably better off with the process that we have, particularly since we have a 40-member city council, which has a pretty direct connection to its districts and the people. I will say that when I ran for council the first time, I created a map, and John published it in his newspaper. We did it on a piece of plywood that showed where all those, how many are there, 400 or something, lived. And Belmead looked like an anthill at that time. And the rest of the city looked pretty blank. And I think one of the things that the activism of the grassroots has done is to create a much more representative system.
I was going to comment that
Sure.
Mayors over the past few years have focused on recruiting individuals to serve on boards and commissions who didn't come from particular neighborhoods. And so we have to applaud their efforts for creating a more diverse group of boards and commissioners who represent the city.
Mr. Siegenthaler, if I could, I guess I'm
Fine, Billy.
I guess I'm privileged because I've got to work for 4 mayors and 2 commissions over the last 25 years. So I've got to see it from both sides. And the one thing that I do know, mayors take a great deal of time, put a great deal of effort into trying to figure out what should the composition of boards and commissions, what should they be. And because they have that kind of global search, they're looking to make sure that the right expertise and the right skill set and the right combination of people from around the county go into it. And I've been blessed to work for commissioners, and they were the boss. Right, once a month they met. They could fire me on the spot, so I worked with them very closely. And I as a citizen, I'll tell you, I think it works. I'm not sure how we would elect them, but when the folks were figuring it out, and with Mr. Cate and all the others back then, they made a great decision with all the boards and commissions that we have.
Mayor Purcell.
Having said all of that, when it doesn't work, and sometimes it doesn't, the best antidote, the only known antidote, to my way of thinking, is political leadership. And I see Janice Santini, I see Jason Holloman, I saw Ronnie Stein here earlier. Political leadership, connection to political leadership, and underlying all of that, neighborhoods. That's where you go when it's not working the way it should work.
You know, it was a tough question that was put. And I'd sort of like to put it in a different context to this audience and ask you to show your courage, as members of this panel have shown theirs. We have an elected school board. There was a time when we had an appointed school board. If you talk to people in this community, there still are disagreements about that. I'm going to ask two questions. How many of you, well, I'll ask one question. How many in the room would favor an appointed school board over an elected school board? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I got it. Everybody else on the other side, raise your hand if you're in favor of elected school board.
I didn't think I was at first, but I think it's worked pretty well.
And so what we have proven really is there are about 3 dozen gutless people in the room.
Good evening. I'm David Padgett, Tennessee State University, and don't be shocked, I'm going to use the G word, gentrification. Nashville has been a pretty new player in the game of gentrification. I'd like to ask, in terms of neighborhoods, how have you, anybody on the panel can answer this, when that occurs in Edge Hill, 12 South, how do you keep community or neighborhood organizations together? Because that could be a very, very friction-based issue, to say the very least.
I looked over at Brenda Morrow from the Organized Neighbors of Edge Hill, because these guys have kept it together in South Nashville, right?
We're trying.
There you go.
Well, Hope Gardens, in my opinion, is the perfect transformation of a community where you were able to bring people together and revitalize a community or redevelop a community without gentrification, which means that you had public involvement, you had private involvement, and you had the people helping to make the decisions on what's going to happen. You had different kinds of housing that was going to be placed there. Usually in gentrification, it's basically a takeover where the developers decide what they're going to do. They come in and they buy up the property and they push people out. Hope Gardens has about 50% of black and white. The developers of that community were basically about 75% were black developers that built the homes in Hope Gardens. You've got some interracial couples that lived there, and it was just a ideal situation of people coming together and working together. And you also have young and old people there. There's a family that has 5 generations that's been in Hope Gardens. So I look to that as a model of how you transform a community through redevelopment and revitalization. And it takes all of the partners coming together to make that happen and to take away gentrification. The bad parts of it.
Yeah, Bill, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, the couple of responses to that, and it's an extremely interesting and important question. Organized Neighbors of Edge Hill now, faced with sweeping gentrification in parts of the community, is trying to develop a project on the east side of 12th Avenue. A project that is multi-unit. There's even been some agreement on the part of the Section 8 folks at MDHA to put a certain number of Section 8s in there in order to create diversity that diversity is a commitment of the neighborhood association. There are 400 plus inclusionary zoning ordinances in this country now. Inclusionary zoning usually works with any development. The oldest, I guess, is Montgomery County, Maryland. Any development has to have 2%, 3%, 5% affordable housing in any development to ensure the fact that in the long term we're going to have diverse neighborhoods and not concentrated poverty or the sweep, the commanding sweep of gentrification. There's no way to really stop gentrification. An able buyer, willing seller is operating and will operate. As in the case of O&E, you've got to take some initiative to see that it doesn't rule the roost.
Betty?
I just have one other comment. I live in the Vanderbilt area, and when I bought the house there coming back to Nashville, there were families that wouldn't let their children spend the night with my children because they thought I lived in a dangerous neighborhood. And but Nashville's going to have to be more tolerant of some density. And fortunately, that's true in my neighborhood to some extent. We build high-rise for elderly. We have alternatives, but not enough. I mean, Nashville tends to be want to divide itself, and we have to become more tolerant of densities that accommodate the coming single household family, not even a family, single person. We have to become tolerant citywide of having halfway houses, really, not just in certain neighborhoods. We've got to get away from concentration and toward inclusion. And it's hard. It's tough.
If I may, can I?
Sure, Fabian.
Well, so we assume that holding on to a community is a good thing. It's a very valuable and important thing that we want to test whatever development idea we have with the idea that we want to hold on. At the end of the day, that community needs to remain there if they want to. So there are tools that we can use to that effect. If a community starts to develop and taxes go up, the people that live there that are on a fixed income, they won't be able to stay. So if we are serious about trying to hold on to that community, then we have to create tools to be able to let those people be able to stay on those homes without having their taxes to go up because the property values went up. The other issue is that you will see with families where you have retired people or people with disabilities or people that are unable to keep up their houses is that as the houses start to deteriorate, codes will write them up, and then they don't have the money to repair their homes, and they end up having to move out. I just got a phone call recently from a gentleman that was asking me if I could, because I work with a nonprofit on the side. My main job is the councilman, I guess, and so he told me that if I could help him paint his house because he got right up by codes, and I said I couldn't. He said, well, I'm just going to have to move. So that's what happens. I mean, I'm not saying the houses should be run down. The houses should that we should look the other way when a house is having a code violation, but we should have tools for people to be able to stay on their home. So, I mean, as a city, we have a responsibility, if we want to hold on to that community, to come up with tools that will help them do that.
John, very.
You know, I think there is maybe time for one more question. Yes, and then I'm going to call on the current mayor of our city and ask him to conclude.
I'll be very loud. I'm Bonnie Basher, and I'm a co-president.
You're about to get a microphone.
Okay, I'll be less loud then. I'm Bonnie Basher, co-president of the Hope Gardens Neighborhood Association. And I thank you for your kind words. And this is more of a throwing out, we want help. When I moved to Hope Gardens, I thought about, am I leading to gentrification in this neighborhood? And that's the last thing I wanted to do. I want to live in a diverse community, which we have, and it's a lovely neighborhood. And I want our neighborhood to remain that way, full of diversity, full of all sorts of ages of people, people who have all sorts of different jobs. And as a neighborhood association co-president, I'm probably going to need help with that, and Davina would say the same thing, that we need help with that, and I've been wanting to meet you so that we can work together, because we too want to shop in the neighborhood. And so this was not really a question, just a thank you to Sharon for her support for us.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome.
Well, depending on how long the mayor talks, we're going to get through on time. You know, I would just, the president of David Lipscomb was here a little earlier tonight. Randy, are you? He's not here, but I would like to ask all of you, in his absence, to give him a round of applause as a word of thanks. And again, I can't close without once more saying that the spirit of Nelson Andrews is here tonight. Those words on the sign over there, honor, courage, humility, characterize what he was about. He had great vision, and he was action-oriented, and Lipscomb's lucky to have that center in his name here. And so I say to you, Carter, and to Sue, how lucky Lipscomb is, how lucky we are. With that, this last 9 months, 8 months and a couple of weeks, has been a great experience for George Cate, our first vice mayor, and Senator Thelma Harper and me, as we have found different ways to go back and reflect on the birth of metropolitan government. All across this country, there are places where we are envied. All across this country, people now speak of Nashville in different ways than they did 50 years ago. Nashville is a model city. One of the reasons it's a model city has been because of our leadership, because of our civic leadership, because of our leadership of our nonprofit institutions, our educational institutions. As much as anything else, we've had 6 mayors who have really gone out of their way, dedicate themselves to public service, and make this a better city. And I would just say, Carl, all of us look to the future, grateful for your leadership, and so happy to have you here tonight. And I'm going to get this stool out of the way and give you room. Thank you all very much. Unless you want to sit in it.
Well, the stool is tempting, but I wouldn't meet the time limit then. That'd be the problem. Well, first let me start off and thank Lipscomb and Linda and Lydia for putting this event together. We appreciate all the hard work that went into it. And I also want to thank all the panelists. This is truly a great panel of people who have, over the years, done so much for our city and will continue to do a lot for our city, and I appreciate that so much. Your hard work builds the foundation of neighborhood organizations and gave neighbors a voice and a vehicle to better communicate with the city and to establish a two-way street of engagement. As noted in the panel discussions, 50 years ago, the citizens of Davidson County and the city of Nashville voted to create the first fully unified government in the United States with the passage of the Metro Charter in 1962. This decision was a revolutionary one, and it's a decision that I think this 50th anniversary celebration has been wonderful, and it's been great working with John and Thelma and George on it. But one of the things I don't want us to do is to take it for granted. Bill knows this because I served Bill as his law director when he was mayor, that they don't get as much attention as other news stories do. But there are periodic challenges and threats to metropolitan government.
There are different times, there are issues that come up where folks want to weaken the charter or do something that would diminish the strength of our metropolitan government. And so I would just ask you to be vigilant and to be supportive of the charter, because it has made a huge difference in the success of this city. The decision that we're going to celebrate at the culmination of the 9-month celebration that we've done in April will be an opportunity for us all to celebrate the accomplishments here. And this has been a particularly interesting year. You know, we've had a lot of national attention. You know, the New York Times said we were the IT city, which is great. And we have a show called Nashville on TV. And I can tell you I was relieved when they finally elected a mayor. It was like a load off my mind. And then my ultimate favorite was Condé Nast, which came out, you know, the great travel magazine in January, and said there were 5 cities in the world that you have to visit this year. You have to visit this year. Those are Toronto, Ontario, Amsterdam in the Netherlands, Seoul, South Korea, New Orleans, and Nashville. And so I know what you're all thinking. You're wondering, how the heck did Toronto and Amsterdam make that list? You know, I don't know how they did, but I know how we did. And it's the people of Nashville, and it's the character of our neighborhoods and the quality of life. One of the things that we always talk about when we talk about people moving to Nashville, or new businesses starting here, or new businesses moving here, is that if we get you here, you're going to want to stay. And I think that's no coincidence that the past 3 mayors are not Nashville natives. We got here as fast as we could, and we figured out we loved the place, and this was a place of enormous quality of life. And so all those accolades are great. But one of the key things that I think about is when I go to bed at night and when I wake up in the morning, I'm not thinking about what the New York Times says or Condé Nast says or what's going on in the TV show Nashville. I'm worried about Nashville. And the things that make strong neighborhoods, the things that make a city strong, are a commitment to having good schools. You know, I can sum up the challenge for schools is to be in a position where when young people are making a decision where they're going to raise their families, we want them to pick Nashville because of the schools. When a business is deciding whether it's going to expand and where it's going to relocate, we want them to pick Nashville because of the schools. And the same thing applies to public safety. We got a great police chief, Steve Anderson. I know that some of the work he's done and the police department has done working with neighborhoods has been absolutely exemplary. But the fact is that another important value for a city is to be safe. And if you can create safety and you can create safe neighborhoods, the folks like you all and the folks on the panel are going to build up strong neighborhoods, and the government's going to have an involvement in that. But that safety and those schools are essential. And it's also absolutely essential that we have people who are involved in creating jobs and creating opportunities. Because one of the great things I think has occurred in Nashville in recent years is that more and more of our kids want to stay in Nashville. Or they go away and they say, I'm coming home because that was the best place I ever lived. And you want to have that place where there's opportunities and jobs. We have another area I think is real important for us is to make the city more mobile, to work on in terms of how we can have transit in the city, but also to make it more walkable, to make it more bikeable. And so that's been a major interest of mine. And I know that many of you have had the pleasure, or I've had the pleasure of walking with you a couple times for 100 miles and doing a variety of 5Ks and other things, and that we have brought in more bicycles. But that's something we need to be doing more of. And one of the best stories I heard during all of this different walking we've done, and we'll be doing more in another month or two, I had the honor to give a T-shirt to a woman named Ruth Hesse, who is 95 years old, and she walked 100 miles on her own in the halls of her senior citizen living center, which was a remarkable achievement. So we need to continue to work on improve on areas, never get complacent, never think we're at where we need to be. We need to always keep working. So one of the things I want to just mention tonight as a sort of a sneak preview of something that will be coming from the Mayor's Office of Neighborhoods very soon, and let me introduce Courtney Wheeler, Courtney is the head of the neighborhoods now, relatively new in the job, and she's going to do an outstanding job. But as many of you may know, I've challenged businesses and organizations throughout Nashville to step up and show how big an impact they can make in livability in our city through the Mayor's Workplace Challenge. Things like the Walk 100 Miles and other things. And basically it's focusing on volunteerism, which is really vital for this city. I mean, the story of this city, in terms of at least the flood in 2010, was the volunteerism of this community. Environmental work. I think Nashville needs to be the greenest city it can be, and we need to keep working on that path. And then working in an area where we can be healthier. That's clearly a challenge for us. So we're going to honor, about 200 businesses have participated in the challenge. We're going to have some honors for that in the very near future. But we are now working on, and Courtney will be unveiling shortly, a neighborhood challenge, which will be challenging neighborhoods to work in those areas, to work to get healthier, to work to have a more environmentally friendly city, and to work in a city that encourages volunteerism. And that will be a major thrust, I think you'll see, of the next 6 months going forward. But finally, the city works because of the citizens, and so I thank you for that. And one of the great things about Nashville, I've been here about 30 years now, but I can say this, that the city gets more interesting every year. I think the diversity in the city, which has changed dramatically during my 30 years living here, has been an enormous plus for our community, an enormous plus. And so I have no hesitation of saying, and I say this all the time to people, that Nashville's best days are still ahead of us. This is going to be a better place 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And that's a great opportunity and a great privilege for us to have such a wonderful future. And I thank you all for your involvement. And again, let me thank John Siegenthaler and George and Thelma for all their hard work they've done in this, what I think is a very important celebration of the 50th anniversary of this great form of government. Thank you.